Henry Grullon, conocido como Henry Live, el reportero de Nueva York, con una presentación hoy, esta noche.
Welcome to Hannity. We begin tonight with a Fox News alert. Breaking now, the charade on Capitol Hill is effectively over. It's done. It is finished. This was the day the Democrats, Trump, Ukraine, quid pro quo, coup, impeachment attempt, and hoax officially died. Their phony, their weak narrative was just ripped to shreds. The gigantic self-serving political stunt is now blowing up in their faces, as we all knew it would. And today, for the very first time, we heard from a witness who actually spoke to the President of the United States. That would be EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland. Every other witness before this was either a hearsay witness or a so-called witness offering opinions on the transcript that we could all read on our own. And just hours ago, Sondland had this to say about his conversations with the president. It doesn't get much more exculpatory than this. Take a look.
I believe I just asked him an open-ended question, Mr. Chairman. What do you want from Ukraine? I keep hearing all these different ideas and theories and this and that. What do you want? And it was a very short, abrupt conversation. He was not in a good mood. And he just said, I want nothing. I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. Tell Zelensky to do the right thing. Something to that effect. So rather than ask the president 9 different questions, is it this, is it this, is it that? I just said, what do you want from Ukraine? I may have even used a 4-letter word. And he said, I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. I just want Zelensky to do the right thing, to do what he ran on, or words to that effect. President Trump never told me directly that the aid was conditioned on the meetings. My testimony is I never heard from President Trump that aid was conditioned on an announcement of elections.
He wants nothing. Nothing. No quid, no pro, no quo like Joe. No conditions were ever mentioned. Those were the instructions from President Trump directly. Major exculpatory evidence is a key moment from the only witness to date that had a first-hand account. Every other witness had nothing or hearsay or conjecture or opinions. There were no real witnesses until today. So what did the Democrats and the corrupt mob and the media do? Well, first, the Associated Press, they issued a very bizarre tweet acting like this testimony actually never happened. Contradicting the testimony of his own ambassador, President Trump says he wanted nothing from Ukraine. And after they were getting widely mocked all over Twitter, AP had to delete the tweet. And meanwhile, over fake news, CNN, the compromised, corrupt, congenital liar, Adam Schiff, he chose to ignore that. Set, match. Watch yourself. Major exculpatory evidence is a key moment from the only witness to date that had a first-hand account. Every other witness had nothing or hearsay or conjecture or opinions. There were no real witnesses until today. So what did the Democrats and the corrupt mob and the media do? Game, set, match. Watch yourself.
And said he gets to impeach the President of the United States because of your testimony. And if you pull up CNN today, right now, their banner says Sondland ties Trump to withholding aid. Is that your testimony today, Mr. Ambassador Sondland, that you have evidence that Donald Trump tied the investigations to the aid? Because I don't think you're saying that.
I've said repeatedly, Congressman, I was presuming. I also said that President Trump...
So no one told you, not just the President. Giuliani didn't tell you, Mulvaney didn't tell you, nobody, Pompeo didn't tell you, nobody else on this planet told you that Donald Trump was tying aid to these investigations. Is that correct?
I think I already testified.
No, answer the question. Is it correct? No one on this planet told you that Donald Trump was tying this aid to the investigations? Because if your answer is yes, then the chairman's wrong and the headline on CNN is wrong. No one on this planet told you that President Trump was tying aid to investigations. Yes or no?
Yes.
So, you really have no testimony today that ties President Trump to a scheme to withhold aid from Ukraine in exchange for these investigations.
Other than my own presumption.
Which is nothing. I mean, that's what I don't understand. So you know what hearsay evidence is, Ambassador? Hearsay is when I testify what someone else told me. Do you know what made-up testimony is? Made-up testimony is when I just presume it. I mean, you're just assuming all of these things, and then you're giving them the evidence that they're running out and doing press conferences, and CNN's headline is saying that you're saying the President of the United States should be impeached because he tied aid to investigations, and you don't know that, correct?
I never said the President of the United States should be impeached.
Nope, but you did. You have left people with the confusing impression that you were giving testimony that you did not. You do not have any evidence that the President of the United States was tied to withholding aid from Ukraine in exchange for investigations. I yield back.
Game, set, match. Watch yourself.
National security issues, and I want to particularly thank Mr. Morrison for his great work on the House Armed Services Committee on which I serve. I wanted to start with the July 25th call between President Trump and President Zelensky. Mr. Morrison, you were on that call, and there was no mention of withholding aid on the call, correct?
That is correct, Congresswoman.
And there was no quid pro quo, correct?
Correct.
No bribery?
Correct.
No extortion?
Correct.
And Ambassador Volker, I presume you got a readout of the call, is that correct?
Very terse readout, but yes.
In this tertiary readout of the call, Ambassador, from the U.S. participants, was there any reference to withholding aid?
No, there was not.
Any reference to bribery?
No, there was not.
Any reference to quid pro quo?
No, there was not.
Any reference to extortion?
No, there was not.
And I presume you also got feedback from your Ukrainian counterparts as to how the call went. Did they mention the withholding of aid?
No, they did not.
Did they mention any quid pro quo?
No, they did not.
And did they mention any bribery?
No, they did not.
And in fact, the day after the call, you met with President Zelensky. This would be on July 26th.
That's correct.
And in that meeting, he made no mention of quid pro quo.
No.
He made no mention of withholding the aid.
No.
He made no mention of bribery.
No.
So the fact is the Ukrainians were not even aware of this hold on aid. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in the coming weeks, you were in touch with Ukrainians as part of your official duties, and this included talking to Ukrainians over the phone, in person, on text, and the Ukrainians never brought up an investigation into the Bidens. Is that correct?
That's correct.
They never brought up the withholding of the aid.
That's correct.
They never brought up quid pro quo or bribery.
Let me bring up the aid. They did bring that up after the Politico article appeared on the 29th.
I'm going to get to that, but until the Politico article,
then, no.
they did not bring it up. And you said in your closed-door deposition, quote, "It never came up in conversation with them, and I believe they had trust in me that they would have asked if that was really what they were worried about."
That's
Is that correct?
That is correct.
And as you pointed out, the Ukrainians never even knew their foreign aid was on pause until the article was published in Politico in August.
That's correct.
So they didn't know during the call.
That's correct.
And in fact, you had to correct Chairman Schiff on this timeline in the closed-door deposition. The chairman of this committee asked you, quote, "When they became aware that military assistance was being withheld for a reason you couldn't explain, no one could explain, weren't they under even greater pressure to give the president what he asked for on the call?" And you answered, Ambassador Volker, quote, "To my knowledge, the news about a hold on security assistance did not get into Ukrainian government circles as indicated to me by the current foreign minister, then diplomatic advisor, until the end of August." Is that your testimony?
Yes, it is.
And Chairman Schiff also got the facts wrong again when he asked you this, quote, "At the point they learned their aid was paused, wouldn't that give them added urgency to meet the president's request on the Bidens?" And you answered, Ambassador Volker, quote, "I think the Ukrainians felt like they are going in the right direction, and they had not done anything. They had not done anything on an investigation," end quote. Isn't it the case, Ambassador Volker, at one point Chairman Schiff said to you, when you were truthfully testifying, quote, "Ambassador, you're making this much more complicated than it has to be," end quote. It's page 127 from the deposition. Is that correct?
I remember that.
But the truth is the facts are indeed not complicated. And I'm going to close out with two questions for the both of you. Did Ukraine open an investigation into the Bidens? Mr. Morrison.
Not to my knowledge, ma'am.
Ambassador Volker.
Not to my knowledge either.
Did either of you ever have any evidence of quid pro quo? Mr. Morrison.
No, ma'am.
Ambassador Volker.
I did not.
Any evidence of bribery?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Any evidence of treason?
No, ma'am.
No evidence of treason.
Investigations were into Burisma, into the 2016 elections, and Ambassador Sondland specifically said that he did not understand that as meeting into Biden. And let's be clear, Manu, the one investigation that has been done into Burisma was done under the Obama administration. The Obama administration had concerns with Hunter Biden sitting on the board of Burisma, as we know from Ambassador Yovanovitch, when she testified and said that she was prepared with that information before her Senate confirmation hearings. So when we talk about investigations, the fact of the matter is, the one investigation into Burisma was done during the Obama administration.
What is the strongest piece of exculpatory evidence that you've heard that exonerates the president? The strongest piece of
the president's own words.
The president's own words.
The president just said to Mr. Sondland, we've said it, I think, 3 times here in the last 10 minutes. That's the strongest piece. And the fact that President Zelensky never announced any investigation. Remember what Mr. Sondland said. He said to get a meeting, to get a call, to get the security assistance, there would have to be an announcement. They got the meeting, they got the call, they got the security assistance without an announcement. That's it right there.
Ambassador Sondland testified in his deposition that when he asked President Trump, "What do you want from Ukraine?" President Trump replied, "I want nothing. There is no quid pro quo." Let me repeat. President Trump said, "I want nothing. There is no quid pro quo." This comes on the heels of the testimony by Ambassador Volker that he saw no evidence of bribery, extortion, quid pro quo, or treasonous actions. We didn't get to ask him about obstruction of justice because we didn't know that was on the table until today. Like the president's call with President Zelensky, Democrats want the American people to believe, as one Democrat on this committee put it, that hearsay is much better than direct evidence. And I think Mr. Ratcliffe from Texas laid out the direct evidence that we have from your testimony today.